My name's Wolf, and through this series of videos I'm going to introduce you to the crazy over-the-top world that nerds like me love so much, that is Warhammer 40,000. So get comfy, buckle in and prepare for a Noob-Splaining session. If you're new to Warhammer 40k or thinking about jumping into the hobby and have spent any amount of time talking to any veteran players, you've probably been told a few horror stories of Games Workshop's past business practices, and let's face it, a lot of YouTubers in the past have said not so nice things about Games Workshop. Well, is this reputation of an overpriced, lawyered up, cease and desist loving company unwarranted, deserved, or outdated? Let's have a look, shall we? But before we do, I need to ask you all, if you're not subscribed, please hit that big subscribe button, and also if you enjoyed this, put a like on it. If you think I missed something or you disagree with something I said, leave it down in the comments. Thank you. Now let's get into it, shall we? The main complaints on Games Workshop are: 1. They have some really shitty sales practices and tactics. 2. Most of their IP is stolen from elsewhere. 3. They cease and desist everyone for even the slightest perceived copyright infringement. 4. They are well overpriced. And 5. They don't care about the fans. Right, so let's go through these in order. The shitty sales practices. Now this came in two forms. Firstly, in store. The second you walked into a Games Workshop store, you were pounced on by a sales rep trying to sell you one of everything for your army and then upselling you even more at the checkout with stuff you don't need or is not relevant. If I had £1 for every time they attempted to upsell me one of the £100 starter boxes that had loads of models in it that I don't play with, when all I wanted was to buy a paint, then I would have enough money to hire someone competent to make these videos for me. Instead, I've got to do it myself. The other shitty thing was the way they sold the models. Now back in the day they were selling the metal minis in blister packs where you would get 2 models to a blister pack, but every squad was pretty much 5 strong, meaning you had a model left over. That was pretty shitty. But they stopped that when they moved to selling the plastic box sets, and instead they started something much worse. Each of the box sets gave you enough sprues to make a full squad with its basic loadout. Now if you took all the upgrades that were available to that squad, then also in that box was an upgrade sprue, which only gave you enough upgrades for half the fucking squad, meaning you have to buy another box set just for a few bits. I mean, that's like buying a car only to find it only comes with 3 wheels, and to get the 4th you need to buy another car and take the wheel from that to put it on your new one. The shitty practice of not providing enough in the box though led to a massive amount of third parties selling bits for the models. So going back to my car analogy, if right next door to the dealership was a company selling single wheels, are you going to buy another entire car? Or just a wheel from somewhere else? They do seem to have fixed this practice, and the last time I walked into a Games Workshop I wasn't pounced on, and also any of the box sets you buy these days seem to have more bits left over than you know what to do with. So it seems for the time being Games Workshop have stopped with the scummy shitty sales practices. For the time being at least. So number 2, they stole pretty much their entire IP from somewhere else. Now there's a large element of truth to this, so I'm just going to rattle through a few examples. Space Marines. The idea of powered armour was directly lifted from the original Starship Troopers book from the 1950s. The Navigator gene was directly lifted from Dune. The Imperial Guard originally had metal breastplates a la medieval times. Today they look almost identical to the Starship Troopers from the movies, and at one stage were cosplaying as Colonial Marines from Aliens. The Necrons, directly lifted from the Terminator franchise. The Gene Stealers are Games Workshop's version of the Alien. The Tyranids are the bugs from Starship Troopers. The Tau, well, pick up any anime or manga featuring battlesuits and you can tell where they got the idea from Tau from. The Arbites, you might as well call them the Judges from Mega City 1. Now an argument can be made that everything has been done, so we're just recycling aspects of everything else now. Terminator is a war of humans against killer robots. So is Battlestar Galactica, but the settings are so far apart that any link to the two is tenuous at best. Star Trek Deep Space Nine was a long-running storyline of several aliens and humans aboard a spaceship involved in a war with the powerful beings. Babylon 5 was the same. I don't think it's fair to say Games Workshop directly plagiarised other IPs, but it was clear they were heavily inspired by them. So, number 3, the cease and desist mentality. Now imagine it's 2012. Warhammer 40k has grown in popularity, but is nowhere near the behemoth and monopoly on the wargaming market it is today. Games Workshop had churned out as many codexes as they could, and every single codex had units listed in it that Games Workshop didn't even make models for. The biggest victims of this, however, were the Orcs and Tyranids, but no army had every model available. On release of the Orc Codex, you had the option of about 6 different vehicles, of which you could only buy one, which was the Dreadnought. So people were using literal toy trucks as Orc battle wagons. And as for the Tyranids, the most viable units didn't even have artwork in the codex, let alone an actual model. So you had no idea what it should look like, and people resorted to using whatever toy or model they could find that wasn't Games Workshop, and that looked like it could be a bit Tyranid. Now couple this with the shitty practice of not enough bits in the box, there was a big rise in third-party manufacturers making just bits, but they were very coy about it. They would list it as something like Space Warrior heavy weapons compatible with other 28mm miniatures. And then Chapter House came along and said hold my beer. Now instead of making bits, Chapter House went balls to the wall and started making full models. Alongside this, they were also selling actual Games Workshop models. So on their website they would be listing official Games Workshop Tyranid Hive Warriors, alongside the Tyranid Murder Beast that they were producing. And they were producing all these models under the exact names they were listed in the Games Workshop codexes. And you can imagine how Games Workshop reacted to that. They sued Chapter House for no less than 109 infringements of copyright. Games Workshop's management at the time were more gamers than complete soulless corporate profit-chasing bastards, so we're not as ruthless as most corporate entities, and it shows. Early in 2013, the judge delivered his decision on the case, and Games Workshop lost massively. The vast majority of the claims that Games Workshop put in, the judge actually sided with Chapter House or just threw them straight out. Some of the claims against Chapter House were upheld, but not many. The judge also listed lots of terms that cannot be copyrighted, things like winged swords or shoulder pads, amongst many other generic words like Imperial Guard, Space Marine, and also Eldar as a word used in Tolkien literature, so no Games Workshop, you can't copyright that either. Chapter House, though, being just 2 people, was still totally eviscerated as a company, but it opened the floodgates on what bit makers can and can't make and what they can label it as. Oh yeah, you know all those units that had roles but no models? The judge deemed Games Workshop can't claim copyright on something it has never created an image of, let alone a physical model. As part of the fallout for this, I'm assuming the entire legal team was replaced, but the CEO of Games Workshop was replaced with a proper soulless corporate bastard, and pretty quickly a whole new set of codexes came out. The main thing was every unit had a model, and all the generic names were slowly changed. Imperial Guard became the Astra Militarum, the Sisters of Battle became the Adeptus Sororitas, and the Eldar became the Eldari. It was the fallout of the Chapter House case that really started Games Workshop into its growth into a soulless, profit-motivated corporate behemoth with a monopoly on the market that it is today. But this isn't a bad thing necessarily. Usually the most ruthless, soulless companies produce some of the best products. I mean, look at Apple and Samsung. But it was this transformation to the behemoth it is today that another shitty practice reared its head. Games Workshop was actively recruiting people whose only job was for them to scour the internet looking for sellers that looked like they even slightly broke copyright so their legal team could cease and desist them. They also put the stop on most animations in the light of their new Warhammer Plus subscription service, which was supposed to have tons of exclusive animation, painting guides, access to all the rules, but ended up just being a bit meh. Because of that, we lost access to a lot of great animations, like If the Emperor Had a Text-to-Speech Device, which had me in tears of laughter. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. The frankly amazing Astartes that looked like it came out of a AAA studio, but in reality was just one guy. And finally they killed off before it even took off the Major Kill series about the homebrew less well-known chapters, which was also fucking hilarious. After massive outcry from the fans, Games Workshop actually relented. As I understand it, the people who were hired to actively look for targets for cease and desist were quietly let go, and Games Workshop just stopped putting out cease and desist to animators and third-party vendors. Well, mostly. Number 4. Are they overpriced? Now, I did a bit of research into this, but it doesn't really help either way with how things are moving in the future. So, let's just get in with it. Now this one seems to be sparking arguments both ways. People saying they are, people are saying they aren't. Now let me be clear, whilst checking out other models whilst doing the research, it reaffirmed what I already believe, and that is that Games Workshop models are by far one of the best, if not the best quality models out there. So with that in mind, you're not going to get Ferrari levels of performance for Ford prices. What they did consistently do was put the prices of their models up every year, even though the sculpts weren't changing. So it got to the point where the prices were rising on a 20-year-old model. That's a pretty shit thing to do. In fairness though, it seems that pretty much every model in the range has had a refresh, and with the new Primaris coming out, and I'm sure with all the other refreshes, it appears that Games Workshop is moving away from 28mm scale to 32mm scale, which is a good thing. It makes the models easier to paint. Now with all the new announcements we've had so far to go with the soon to be released 10th edition, seem to have moved the goalposts even further, with the fact that the combat patrol boxes are now a starter army and not a starting your collection point. This is reflected on the boxes. They were originally called start collecting boxes, not start playing it. But it appears that having a 2000 point army as a minimum thing is a thing of the past. And if that's true, that brings the price of 40k armies down massively. I'm taking a bet that tournament games will still be 2000 points, but casual games will be much lower, allowing players to build up their army at a steady rate over a time that they feel comfortable with as they gain more experience and learn the mechanics of the game. Now if you're going to start playing in tournaments, you're probably going to want about 3000 plus points worth of models to choose from. But I think it's fair to say most players never enter a tournament but will happily play casual games against virtual strangers, and once they have an army they are happy with, they'll either get additional showcase models like characters or vehicles, or start a second army. So point number 5. Games Workshop don't care about the fans. Well, this is where the cynic comes out in me. I'm sure that most capitalist corporate companies have people who do generally care about their customers, but let's be real and honest here, none of them really do. A capitalist company exists to make as much money as possible, and the only thing they care about is that you spend money with them and not their competitors, and Games Workshop are no different. Remember, only 50% of Games Workshop staff are actually into the hobby, so that's half the staff who only care about a profit, not the game. Ford don't give a crap about you as long as you're in a brand new Ford. Your broadband provider only gives you good service, or else you will take your money elsewhere. Now, do Games Workshop listen to the fans? Most of the time no, because in fairness, what most Games Workshop fans have asked for is stupid or not profitable. The rise of games like Infinity and one-page rules that give away the rules for free, and 3D printers has forced Games Workshop to not only offer competitively priced products like combat patrol boxes, but also to at least pretend this corporate monster actually cares about you. That's how commerce works. Companies pretend they care about you. You pretend you don't know they are pretending, and thus money is exchanged for goods and services. In summary, was Games Workshop a shitty company that overpriced its models and used scummy sales tactics? Absolutely. Is it still that way? Absolutely not. Don't get me wrong, they are not perfect, but no company is. Will they stay this way? Well, as long as they keep pretending they give a fuck about the fans, I'll keep pretending I don't know they're pretending. I guess we shall have to wait and see if the release of 10th edition causes them to slip back into their old ways or start pretending even harder they care. I generally hope it's the latter, as I have experienced the shitty side of Games Workshop and I'm really enjoying this new version of them. I'm optimistically hopeful that as of this point forward, Games Workshop sticks to its new practices and brings more players into the hobby. If you're new to 40k or considering getting into it, my advice is now is the time. You missed all the real shitty scummy tactics, and this is looking like it could be a golden age for Games Workshop and 40k. And that's my conclusion on Games Workshop. They were a shitty scummy company that seems to have turned itself around, or at least pretending to turn itself around. So the only thing left for you to do now is hit a like or a dislike and leave a comment on whether you agree with me or not. And there we have it. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment. Better still, if you know somebody who could do with a bit of noob-splaining on Warhammer, and share this video with them. And at any point, if you learned something or laughed, then please hit that subscribe button. I won't ever be doing a Patreon or a merch store, so that subscribe button is the best way you can show your support and thanks from me.